Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got a double header, and first we're going to have an unboxing, and this is actually sent to me by one of you, Tim. Thank you very much, Tim. Seriously, this is very, very kind, and I've had many people over the channel's life reach out and send me stuff, and it's really one of the only ways I'm able to smell all of these creations from people. It's pretty impossible to keep up with everything. Plus, you don't want to keep up with everything. There's too much stuff to keep up with everything. But thanks to the kindness of people like Tim and many of the other people who have sent me stuff, I'm able to at least get my nose on a larger variety of perfume than what I would have previously. So thank you very much. Seriously, it means a lot. It's very kind of you going out of your way, packing these, creating these samples, you know, paying for the shipping. Honestly, it's way above and beyond, way more than I ever thought anyone would ever do for such a small channel. So I really, really do appreciate it. So we're going to do this unboxing, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a This Is Not a Top 10. And it's going to be on the note of Tarragon. So the joke became a reality. If you've been kind of following the channel, you know that periodically I've made mention of how so many of my favorite fragrances happen to have this Tarragon note. And believe it or not, Tarragon is this perennial herb that comes from the sunflower family, but it gives off this licorice anise-like bitterness to a perfume, which I really like. Some people will compare it to mugwort or artemisia, and it does have some of that green artemisia-like feel, but I feel like Tarragon adds more. It adds this, you know, this deep, bitter, licorice-like vibe, and I really enjoy it. It's something that I've just noticed, you know, periodically as you go through your perfume journey, if you will. You know, you're going to pick stuff like this up, and this is just something that I happened to pick up, so I figured, what the hell? Let's make the video. Someone made a joke about it the other day, and I said, you know what? It's a great idea. I actually do want to make that video. So I've got 50 plus Tarragon fragrances we're going to talk about today, but first, we're going to do this unboxing. Let's see what Tim was kind enough to send me. I hope you don't mind me giving you a shout out, Tim. I hope you didn't want to remain anonymous. If you did, there's many Tims out there in the world, so you will blend right in. So let's see what's in here. Oh my God, there is a lot of stuff in here. Dude, that is very, very kind. Let's see. Let's see what we got. There is a lot of stuff in here. Alright, so here, let me put this on the ground. Alright, so first we've got, this is going to be a long video, so buckle in. This is Guerlain Mayotte. I believe it's Mayotte. I'm going to have to look this up. M-A-Y-O-T-T. 2006 this came out. Oh, this is one of these exclusives. Yeah, this is one of these discontinued exclusives. That's awesome. Like I said, no way I would ever be able to get my nose on stuff like this. But it's supposed to be this floral sweet green. So it opens up green apparently with this frangipani, tuberose, jasmine, neroli, ylang ylang, sandalwood, vetiver, and vanilla. And 2006, I wonder if Jean-Paul Guerlain was still making. I wonder if this was still something when he was there. I'm going to have to look into that more. And then there's also Mademoiselle, Guerlain Mademoiselle. Sorry for my French. Every Frenchman's ears are probably bleeding right now. But yeah, these are perfumes that there's no way I would ever be able to get a chance to smell. Guerlain Mademoiselle Guerlain 2011. I think this is another one of these. Is this Le Petite Robe Noire Model 2? I wonder if it was the same thing. Galbanum, Bergamot, Lemon, Iris, Marshmallow. That's insane. Orange Blossom, Vanilla, and White Musk. And I am fighting off this cold. You can see, if you hear it in my voice, you'll hear the crackling. So I do apologize. I'll put a lozenge in there if it gets too bad. Micallef Royal Vintage. Are you guys familiar with this brand, Micallef? I've heard of them, but I don't think I've ever smelled anything from Micallef. Royal Vintage, Micallef. Let's see, Royal Vintage. $2013. Oh, is this the one that's supposed to smell like, is this the one that's supposed to smell like Aventus? I know there was a Micallef that was supposed to smell like Aventus. Is it Royal Vintage? I think it is. I think this is the one that's supposed to smell like Aventus. Guerlain La Initiale. Guerlain La Initiale. Not familiar with any of these Guerlains. Guerlain La Initiale. 2020. Interesting. Powdery Floral. Bergamot, Jasmine, Orange, Turkish Rose Absolute, Iris, Palladia, Tonka Bean, Patchouli, Vanilla, White Musk, and Caramel. And then finally we've got Guerlain, Montpresso, Nectar. Is this the really expensive one? Is this like the $1,000 Guerlain? Montpresso Nectar, 2009. I can't remember if this is the one that's very expensive. Man, with this cold, I'm having a hard time smelling, but I can smell my scent of the day okay. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is Petit Grand, Bitter Almond, Orange Blossom, Jasmine, Sandalwood, Gaiac Vanilla, and White Musk. Here, let me put these up here for review. My sample stash for review is growing. All right, so that's one bag. There's a lot of stuff in here, so hope you got your seatbelt on. Man, what a blessing. What a blessing this is. Happy Thanksgiving, Ramsey. Thanks for this. This is, oh my God, there's so much material in here. What are these? I wonder if this is a particular brand, because they're not actually listed here by name. They've got Jasmine Narcotique. Let me look up and see if I can figure out which brand this is. Jasmine Narcotique. Ah, these are Aaron Terrence Hughes samples. Okay. Jasmine Narcotique, which is discontinued, interestingly enough. Night Blooming Jasmine, Jasmine Samba, Cocaine. Literal cocaine note. That's bonkers. I've never seen that before in my life. Suede. This is not a top 10 cocaine. Suede Musk. Okay, that's interesting stuff. Ozone. I think these are all Aaron Terrence Hughes. I think this is like everything he's ever done. Guapo. Yeah, I think these are all Aaron Terrence Hughes. Oxytocin. Yeah, definitely. Definitely they're all Aaron Terrence Hughes. Okay, we'll put you with the Aaron Terrence Hughes stash. Blood Orange. Haze Black. You know, even though I can't watch that guy's channel, he's just a little too out there for me. He's a little too eccentric. He's a little too whatever you want to call it. I think his fragrances are decent from what I've smelled so far. For a modern niche house, it seems like he uses good materials. I think his blending maybe leaves a little to be desired, but that's something he can improve on. So, all right, I'm going to put these over here. That's good stuff. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, my friend. That's a lot. That is a lot of content. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. That'll be tons and tons of videos at some point. Okay, so let's do the This Is Not a Top 10 Tarragon, shall we? And let's get started with my scent of the day. So this is a niche fragrance, and you know, I have learned about myself that I kind of have to go back and forth. If I wear too much niche, I get bored of it. I want to go back to vintage, but then when I wear the vintages, which I know and love so much, I want to test some of these new niches out and wear some of the niche fragrances too. So I like to go back and forth. And today was a niche day, and it was a Nasomatto. Nasomatto. And actually, I think Nasomatto is an Italian brand. I don't think it's, I think it's like Nasomatto, ayo, ayo. So yes, there you go, Nasomatto Pardon. And Pardon is basically a, it's basically a, I don't want to say rip-off, but it's heavily inspired by L'Instant de Guerlain, which I love and have 2 bottles. So honestly, this was probably a useless buy for me, but I've had it for years and I've worn it once. So I figured, what the hell, I'm going to wear it again today. And interestingly enough, my wife gave me a compliment on it. She goes, I really like your fragrance today. She never, ever compliments my fragrances. So that is, I was like, really? Okay, interesting. You like the patchouli, eh? But it's supposed to be like a patchouli oud, if you will. It doesn't have the... L'Instant de Guerlain has this, it has this like calming tea, like facet. So L'Instant de Guerlain has this, tea and hibiscus flower, hibiscus seeds, which are very rare. You don't see that in perfumery very often. And this star anise in the top. I love L'Instant de Guerlain. It is Poron. It is it's probably the last great Guerlain, actually, and that's a big statement, but I think that's true. I think it is the last great Guerlain. So Pardon is a DNA I like, but I can't help but thinking, you know, I'll just wear L'Instant de Guerlain. It's not worth it, but I did get a good deal on this. If you can find this 30 ml bottle for less than $100, pull the trigger. It's not bad, but honestly, I'd rather just wear L'Instant de Guerlain. All right, let's do this. This is not a top 10 Tarragon video, so let's get started with a couple samples first. One that I have reviewed and one that I will review very soon. The first one that I will review very soon is Dryad, and so I've been threatening to do a full review on this. I need to just wear it, force myself to wear it, and do the full review, make it my scent of the day. And Dryad is absolutely amazing. It's like a vintage green chypre in a modern niche fragrance, and this just goes to prove that even with all of the restrictions on the chypre genre, even with the oak moss ban and all of this stuff going on, or, you know, if they can use oak moss, it's a very tiny amount, that quality chypres can still be made. It is still possible. So Dryad, I want to do it justice, though. I want to be in the right state of mind. I want to make sure I'm, you know, I'm feeling well enough where I can really smell and break it down for you guys. And then, so that has Tarragon in the top with star anise as well, like L'Instant de Guerlain. And this is one that I actually did a review on just a couple weeks back. This is called Civet by Zoologist. And I enjoyed this one. This is also a vintage old school chypre. And, you know, it's probably in the same ballpark as, it's very similar to Mitsuko or Roja's Chypre Extraordinaire, for example. That one really comes to mind. I like this, but I didn't love it enough to want to go out and buy a bottle. But if you're in the market for a good modern chypre with a vintage twist, Civet is one to look into. This is a good fragrance. It's not what you would expect by looking at the name. Okay, I think I am going to have to put a lozenge in. Bear with me. Lozenge of the day, Ricola. All right, this should keep me going. All right, so next on the This Is Not a Top 10 Tarragon list, we've got actually a fragrance I have not had the chance to smell yet. And it's a Elsa Schiaparelli perfume, and it's called Shocking. So this was very kindly sent to me by Natalia, and Shocking is came out in 1937. And for you guys that don't know, this is basically the bottle that Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Male took inspiration from. Shocking. This came out in 1937. So you can see that even as awesome as that Le Male bottle is, as popular as it is, it's not original. It's a copy of something even older. And that's why you have to go back. You have to go back and look at these vintage fragrances, you know, to really study and understand the history. And if you're into fragrances the way we're into fragrances. So yes, excited to get to know Shocking, even though this is a modern bottle. I'm sure it's still very good. Okay. And I think this is still even being produced too, which is crazy. There's a story behind Elsa Schiaparelli and Coco Chanel. Apparently they hated each other. They absolutely despised each other. They said some terrible things about each other in the press. I think the one that stands out to me the most is, I think Coco Chanel said that you know, the hotels leave the back doors open so Elsa Schiaparelli can kind of sneak in and sneak out of the hotels without people seeing her. You know, it got dirty like that. They kind of really went at each other. They were almost like bitter arch enemies back in the day. Interesting background story. Speaking of background, this is Jil Sander Background. And this came out in 1993. And I have a early impression of this coming very soon. This is a little, I think this is a 3.5 ml mini that Anuj found for me. And so I'm excited to get to know this one a little bit more before I review it. It's anise, bergamot, tarragon, raspberry, lavender, lemon, carnation, heliotrope, jasmine, lily, lily of the valley, rose, cinnamon, amber, benzoin, musk, sandalwood, tonka bean, vanilla, and cedarwood. And what's interesting about these Jil Sander fragrances, they always throw a little bit of a curveball, and I've noticed raspberry is kind of a note du jour for many of those Jil Sander fragrances in the late 80s and early 90s. For example, Jil Sander Feeling Man, and this is the best version of Drakkar Noir I've ever smelled. This is Drakkar Noir done right, is the way I would describe this. It's anise, tarragon, bergamot, lavender, fruits, cyclamen, balsam fir, geranium, raspberry. So that raspberry note is like something that continues throughout the line. Orris root, jasmine, amber, oak moss, musk, patchouli, sandalwood, tobacco, tonka bean, and cedar. And I absolutely love this stuff. Some of the bottles say Feeling Man, and some of them say Man. Same fragrance. Okay, next we have, actually, there was one fragrance that I just noticed I forgot to grab. I'm going to grab it right now. Let's knock it out while I'm thinking of it. Alright, so the one that I forgot to grab is called Businessman. And it's by a house called Panache. And they have some fragrances I would kind of like to dive into. They're a house that gets overlooked pretty regularly. They're not as, they're kind of a smaller house, but they've got some really good perfume. So if you like the vintage style from the 80s, this takes this green, spicy fougere and really does it right. I think this is a big underrated gem. Is it corny with the little ruler? Yes, absolutely. But is it a great fragrance? Yes, it is. The ingredients here seem very high quality. It seems like, for some reason, when I smell this, I think of like the nitro musks from back in the day. You know, governments around the world ended up banning nitro musk because they were finding it in everything. You know, they were finding it in women's breast milk. They were finding it in, you know, in the water that's coming out of the tap. They were finding nitro musks in everything. And so they ended up trying to ban them because they were like, man, you know, we can't have, you know, you just can't have nitro musk show up everywhere. And so this gives me that old school nitro musk feel with lavender, rosemary, artemisia, lemon, bergamot, tarragon, geranium, jasmine. There is this, there's this fougere, fern-like smell with thyme, cedar wood, but what really gets me is the base. And so imagine you took that fougere, but you added this Russian leather in the base, and it really is beautiful. I love this fragrance, probably even backup bottle worthy, but I'll just cherish the one that I have. So Panache Businessman. Okay, next on the list, we've got a Tom Ford, a baby Tom Ford. And this is extremely rare and hard to find now, and I just have a little decant, but I will try to review this before the juice is all gone. This is called Moss Breches. B-R-E-C-H-E-S. Moss Breches. 2007. This was amongst the original release when Tom Ford launched the brand. So this was right up there with Oud Wood, Tobacco Vanille. And this is tarragon, clary sage, rosemary, beeswax, wood, spices, benzoin, labdanum, moss, and patchouli. And if you've ever smelled Luciano Pavarotti, this one right here, you will get in the realm of Moss Breches. So Pavarotti came out in the 90s, I believe, and this is a great fragrance. Speaking of a Russian leather base, that is absolutely stunning, but this has this honeyed patchouli with ivy in the top, very rare ivy note. And Moss Breches gives you that impression. It gives you a little bit of that Pavarotti vibe. But it must be probably because of the beeswax, but even beeswax and patchouli combo. So even though this is really hard to come by, you don't have to spend big money. Try to get a bottle of Pavarotti instead. Value for money on that is way, way better. I saw a 50 ml of Moss Breches on eBay for like $1,500. So don't pay that. You're a pervert if you pay that. And next, and so what you'll notice, by the way, with this tarragon thing is you're going to notice many of my favorite old school fragrances pop up over and over and over again. Apparently that bitter, anise-like, you know, green artemisia. You'll often notice artemisia with tarragon mixed together, and that's the case here. But it pops up over and over and over again in these vintage fragrances that I love. Even when they went to the 90s, and many of the fresher fragrances, like we'll talk about a couple of the sport fragrances, and they still use that tarragon note, and many of those are some of my favorite sport fragrances. I don't like the modern sport fragrances, so there must be something to that. There must be something to the way that tarragon interacts with the rest of the fragrance that I'm just really attracted to. And so this is probably one of the most underrated leather scents. If you watch my channel, you know about this fragrance. But this house in general, I would even go so far as to say this is the most underrated house in the fragrance world. This does not get love. It does not get hype. They just pump out great fragrance after great fragrance after great fragrance, but very few people talk about them. It's from the house of Etro, and this is called Gomma. And this is actually made by a master perfumer, Edouard Fleischier, who made some amazing stuff. This is so good. citrusy tarragon, caraway, artemisia with lavender, rose, jasmine, ylang, clove, birch, sandalwood, patchouli, cedarwood, vetiver, and vanilla. And there's this leathery, so the birch in the base gives off this leathery smokiness. It's even though there's no leather note listed, there is a huge, this is a gigantic leather fragrance. And this is the vintage eau de cologne. So if you can find the eau de cologne, that's what I would recommend. I wouldn't be shocked if the eau de toilette was still very good, because I believe in Etro as a house, and I think they really do care about the product they're putting out there. But if you can find the eau de cologne, go for it. And then, speaking of discontinued fragrances I absolutely love, this is Robert Piguet Bandit from 1944, I think. Somewhere in the 40s. God, this fragrance, man. Oh, if you're a leather lover, you have to get your nose on this. Yesterday, during the Bernard Chant video, I talked about the way Bernard Chant uses aldehydes and how it's so different from anything else I've ever smelled. The aldehydes in this are right up there. Masterclass aldehydes. Right there with the best. Even though this is not a Bernard Chant, it's a Germain Cellier. This is probably this would be one of the reference benchmark leathers. And this was marketed towards women, mind you. Tarragon, galbanum, bergamot, aldehydes, gardenia, neroli, orange, ylang ylang, carnation, jasmine, rose, violet, amber, oak moss, leather, castoreum, musk, myrrh, patchouli, vetiver, and civet. Sorry, I'm a little off my game today. Between the sore throat and the lozenge in my mouth, we're moving in slow motion, but we will get this done. So Bandit, I would highly recommend, especially if you're a leather lover, and if you can find these older bottles. Look how they used to do the writing, the batch codes on the older bottle. Looks like some guy with a, with a Sharpie marker, a white Sharpie wrote that. Okay, next, speaking of famous leathers, all the way back to 1980, this is Dior's Jules, one of the best leathers of all time, and thank God I've got a backup of this coming. This exact bottle, I think, 50 mils, splash, beautiful. Dior Jules is just one of the greatest leathers of all time. There's no other way to say it. It's bergamot, tarragon, cumin, lavender, cyclamen, basil, jasmine, carnation, rose, sandalwood, cedar, amber, oak moss, leathers, musk, tonka bean, and suede. Beautiful dark green. And again, you've got the tarragon in the top with other green notes. So here it's basil and cumin. And this was done by Jean Martel, who did Paco Rabanne Pour Homme in 1973. And he didn't do very many masculines. He did Paco Rabanne Pour Homme and Jules. And that's it as far as the masculine side. If you're only going to do 2 fragrances for men, how about those 2, though? All-time greats. All right, next, we're going to go to the house of Paco Rabanne. And this is 1988. This is Ténéré. Now, Ténéré is a masculine floral, is how they would describe it. It's a spicy, masculine, animalic floral, is how I would describe it. Lots of indoles, lots of this pissy. Think about the way that this is a Pierre Wargnier creation, and Pierre Wargnier did Boss No. 1, which is also on this list. Think about the way the pissy honey comes out in Boss No. 1. This is 3 years later. So he took that pissy honey accord, which works so well, and there's many of the same notes in here too, and amped up the florals. The animalic florals in the late 80s were a big hit back in the day. Think about things like Iquitos by Alain Delon. There's many other examples of big masculine florals coming out in the late 80s, early 90s. And so that's the style of Ténéré. Pissy Honey a la Boss Number 1, but with this big masculine floral accord. Lots of jasmine, Indolic jasmine, Lily of the Valley, and rose, and there's this ambery, leathery dry down, old school dry down, which I absolutely love. I love Ténéré. I've got a backup of that. Okay, next we've got 2 Aramis fragrances, and one is Tuscany per Uomo. Probably one of the best anise fragrances. I do love Tuscany per Uomo. I love wearing this in the heat, in the warm weather. Even though it's got this oak moss, leathery, heavy dry down, I love that in the heat because the citruses with the tarragon and the caraway and the orange blossom is just stunning. And then the other Aramis fragrance is Havana. So Havana came out in 1994. And it's a spicy, woody fragrance that was created by Nathalie Feistauer and Xavier Renard. And interestingly enough, this fragrance went for the same brief as Tommy, the one that was so popular in the 90s. I forget what it was called. I think it might have just been called Tommy. And so if you smell these two side by side, you'll kind of get this similar association, but this is much more grown up. Tommy is much more playful. And so Havana is an amazing, spicy, woody tobacco with that tarragon in the top. There's some aldehydes that, interestingly enough, going back to Bernard Chant, and he made a couple different Aramis fragrances. He made Aramis from 64. He made Devon from 77. And he made Aramis 900 from 73, and many of those had that patented aldehydes that he was such a master at using. Nathalie Feistauer and Xavier Renard wanted to recreate those aldehydes in Havana. And so when you smell Havana in the top, you will get this slight aldehydic accord. They will not be able to recreate the master. You know, Bernard Chant was the master at aldehydes. But there is a beautiful aldehydic accord with green notes, that tarragon, and then it dries down to this leathery tobacco. Beautiful perfume. And rumor is Estee Lauder is thinking of getting rid of this whole line, this whole gentleman's collection. Could be sold off or axed. And so if you're interested, while you can find these bottles for $20, 30 bucks, I would highly encourage you to grab them. Okay, next on the list, we've got a Etienne Aigner fragrance. And I've got a backup of this because this is only a 15 mil, but I was just lucky to score what I did here. This is from 1978. It's a very rare beast, and it's called Super Fragrance. How about this packaging? I really want some of the other Etienne Aigner fragrances, like Number 1, but there's not very many listed in my neck of the woods. Look at that. How 70s is that? So cool. One of the perfumeries stuck their sticker on the back of this one. But this is something that Jonathan in his video is mentioning as kind of a trailblazer. It's a fragrance that many other fragrances took cues from when they did their creations. Beautiful tarragon in the top with green galbanum, sweaty clary sage, iris, jasmine, patchouli, sandalwood, cedarwood, amber, costus, musk, tonka, and vanilla. And it's that contrast of that, you know, herbal, spicy with the woods, the sandalwood, the cedarwood, bit of iris that makes it very posh, and then that ambery, vanilla, tonka bean, you know, warm dry down that just makes it a beautiful fragrance. But it is, there is some animalic touches to it. It's the costus, and sometimes costus can come across smelling almost like a wet animal. You know, it has this dirty, unwashed vibe to it, and it's here. And so while this fragrance may not have been the biggest hit, I think Jonathan's probably right in saying that this was a big inspiration for other perfumes. Okay, Next, we're going to jump to 1978, and it's one of the greatest masculines of all time, Polo Green. Man, I love Polo Green. Of course, I have a backup of this. This is the original Warner version. I don't know if you can see that, but that's the original Warner version. I've got a Cosmere backup. Warner or Cosmere is the one that I would tell you to try to look for. You know, if you're really into this hobby and want to get the correct version, that is. If you just want to go buy something that gets close, go buy the modern stuff. But the modern stuff is, you know, it's not as good. It's lost a step. It is a shadow of its former self, yes. So this is basil, bergamot, tarragon, coriander, caraway, juniper berry, geranium, jasmine, chamomile, leather, carnation, pepper, pine, rose, amber, oak moss, musk, patchouli, tobacco, vetiver, and cedar. How's that for a note breakdown? Love the interplay of tobacco with leather here and that pine. It's so masculine. The tarragon mixed with the basil in the top and coriander. Beautiful, spicy, herbal opening. I love that. I think that's Carlos Benaim's best work. And then we've got another Ralph Lauren, and this is Safari for men. This is also a Cosmere, and I've got another Cosmere backup. Now, again, same thing. The new one is made by L'Oreal. If you're really into this hobby, I would urge you to try to get a Cosmere. This is this aldehydic lavender, very early 90s. You know, Chris from Scentland says sunshine in a bottle. And this really does have that late 80s, early 90s vibe about it. I love so much. I mentioned many fragrances that kind of fall in this DNA. If you like stuff like Jazz by YSL, which is coming up later on the video. If you like Ungaro pour l'Homme 1. If you like Escada pour Homme, if you like Guerlain Heritage, they're all kind of in this realm. And this is one of them. But how about this bottle? Beautiful, right? Almost like a liqueur decanter or something like that with the precious stone on top, the wood. And interestingly enough, there was a photo shoot that Ralph Lauren did in Africa on a safari, and that's where it came from. That's where Safari came from, which I didn't know that, but I saw some of the original pictures at the photo shoot in Africa, and it makes sense. It's a beautiful collection, if you will. I'm not into the fashion side of things very much, but I could totally see how it all comes together. Okay, next we've got another Ralph Lauren, and this is Polo Sport. So again, this is a Cosmere bottle, and what you want to look for, if you can see the bottom, you can just make sure it says Cosmere right here. If you cannot see the bottom of the bottle in like a eBay posting or something, just make sure that the atomizer is silver. So the new atomizers are blue. And actually, I bought a fragrance off of an eBay seller that had a Cosmere box, but inside of it was a Luxury Products LLC bottle. It was the blue sprayer. I was so pissed. I returned it from, I'll never buy from that person again, because they were trying to screw me, basically is what they were doing. They knew better. They've been in business forever. They were a big perfume shop, I think in California. And, but yes, I was smart enough to catch it. And so I sent it back and bought from someone else. But this is the smell of high school for me. You know, even though this came out in the 90s, by the time I was in high school in the early 2000s, many of the, you know, boys on my basketball team or whatever wore Polo Sport. And even to this day, when it's hot out, this gets lots of attention. Women love this scent on a man. It's very fresh. It does have this slight aquatic vibe to it, but it's not an out-and-out aquatic because it has these green touches, and that's where the tarragon comes in. So there's tarragon, there's mint, there's a seagrass accord, there is woods in the base. You get guaiac wood, sandalwood, cedarwood. This is actually a very complex fragrance. Harry Fremont made this. I think he's a great perfumer. And there's this gingery rosewood that you'll get in the mid and Polo Sport as well. It's very complicated, actually. And so that's what's so interesting about these older fragrances, even going back to the early 90s, early to mid 90s. Something like Polo Sport, which just seems like a fresh, boring aquatic, is anything but. There's actually a lot of moving parts to this. And that's why I love vintage fragrances so much, is it's just lost nowadays. That art of putting in the effort and time and creating something special is just lost. It's just non-existent. Man, maybe doing a video when I can barely talk is not the best idea, but we're going to get through this. We are going to get through this. So, next on the list, we have a Paloma Picassl fragrance, and this is another beautiful fragrance for summer. I mentioned Polo Sport. This is stunning in the heat. Came out in 1992, a couple years before Polo Sport, and it's called Minotaure. As you can see, Minotaure. Minotaure is this fruity, beautiful, aldehydic, fruity, herbal, spicy. It's almost like this strange combination between sweet and spicy, because there's this fruity aldehydic opening with green galbanum, tarragon, bergamot, coriander, geranium, jasmine, lily of the valley, rose, amber, musk, tonka bean, sandalwood, vanilla, and cedar. And so there is a slight touch of sweetness, but it's not overdone like the masculines of today. You're not going to walk around smelling like bubblegum wearing Minotaure. This is probably my favorite fragrance from the house of Paloma Picassl. Honestly, I like this better even than the big Chypre everyone else loves from the 80s, which maybe if I smelled a vintage, I would love it more, but I love Minotaure right now. And then we've got a Lagerfeld, and this is called Lagerfeld Cologne. So the one you want, if you have a choice, again, if you're collecting, if you're a collector like I am, because that's the thing in this hobby, is it's not just about the juice inside of the bottle. Yes, the juice is what's most important, especially to people who love perfume, but there's also a collector's aspect to this hobby, right? And you know, the collector's aspect is you want the correct version if you're a collector of vintage perfume. And the correct version of Lagerfeld Classic is what it's called now, but it used to be called Lagerfeld Cologne, is the one that says Cologne. Now, to be fair, this version right here is still good. This one that says Classic, look at the difference in the writing. So this is the new one, Classic. This is the original one. You can see the difference in the writing of Lagerfeld. One says Cologne, one says Classic. Both are discontinued now, shockingly discontinued. They created a bunch of these, so I think there's going to be a lot on the market, but I got this 100 and, what is this? This was 150 mil. This is 150 mil. I got this with a body wash for like $19 a couple years back. And mine was made by Inter Parfums. This original one that I have was made by Bethco. Bethco did really good perfumes back in the day. But there are a couple different iterations of this. But as long as you get one that says cologne spray, it doesn't really matter who the producer is. All of them were good. I love this fragrance. I need to wear this soon. It's got this, again, aldehydic, spicy opening with tarragon, orris root, rose, amber, oak moss, musk, tonka, vanilla. But it's the tobacco and this powdery orris. There's this big powdery orange, almost like the color of the juice. You know, it really does give off this orange. The difference is with the vintage is the Lagerfeld Cologne has much more of that tobacco and oak moss, and it really felt like a masculine. Whereas this has all of that taken out, and it just kind of feels like a beautiful, you know, a beautiful fragrance without the bite. It doesn't have the masculine tobacco and all the other stuff that we love. So, if you can, go for the cologne version. And then we have a Le Male fragrance. A Le Male fragrance. A Jean-Paul Gaultier fragrance called Le Male. And I really don't like Le Male. This is an older bottle. BPI, I think is... There, you can see it right there. BPI made this one. And it's just too sweet for me. That lavender, minty, vanilla thing is just too sweet for me. There is tarragon in the top. And I was thinking even that's probably why people say this has kind of like a vintage vibe to it, is because of the tarragon. But I will force myself to wear this one day for you guys and talk about it. But I really don't like Le Male. But one fragrance I do like is YSL's Kouros, one of my favorite of all time. This is the Charles of the Ritz version. So this is the original one, and you can kind of see the stain that the fragrance left around the, look at this right here. So apparently this fragrance never used real civet. Even in the original Charles of the Ritz, there was no civet. It was this animalis note, or whatever they called it. And, you know, dosed up or dosed down, I guess, was the biggest thing, which is fine. I still prefer this version, although any version that you can get without the silver shoulders, or with the silver shoulders, is what you want. The ones without the silver shoulders, that's, you know, all white, is the newer version that seems much more toned down. You know, it's Kouros without its armor, or without the claws. So if you can find that version, that's what I'd go for. And then, so you can kind of see, look how many of my favorite fragrances of all time use this tarragon note. So this is Van Cleef & Arpels Sar. Many people call this one of the greatest fougères of all time. And, you know, there's maybe one or two fragrances on this list that would argue with that. But many people love Sar. This is a version made by a company called Adipare. Adipare made this one. This is an old tester. But any version that you can get of this, get it. Because it's discontinued. It's very hard to find. But Sar is this green, spicy, and, you know, it's very classic in structure. There's a ton of oak moss in the base, but there's also leather, sandalwood, slight touch of castoreum, just a little bit. I don't get very much, but just a touch. And pine, rosemary, artemisia, tarragon, pepper, spicy carnation. It is an amazing fragrance. Very aromatic and woody. And then, one of my favorite fragrances of all time, I have 3 bottles of this. This is YSL's Jazz. What a great house YSL was. How far they've fallen. Seriously, look how far they've fallen. They used to create stuff like this. Kouros and Jazz. And now look what they're putting out. Just complete shite. Even in their you know, high-end range, everything in their high-end range even smells designer and boring. So I don't know what's wrong with YSL, but whatever it is, they need to fix it, because they should be getting back to stuff like this. This was fantastic perfumery. Anise, basil, tarragon, cardamom, coriander, lavender, nutmeg, cinnamon, carnation, geranium, Irish jasmine, amber, oak moss, leather moss, sandalwood, tobacco, tonka, and cedar. And again, this is late 80s, early 90s, sunshine in a bottle, you know, happy days fragrance for me. And there's actually another, so I mentioned Safari earlier falls into this category, so does Jazz. And there's another one on the list that I'll also mention falls into this category. I love this category of fragrance. I'm so at home wearing these. I just feel so comfortable. And it always feels elegant. It feels, you know, like today I'm wearing the buttoned up shirt, right? You wear a shirt with the buttoned up and, you know, or you've got a suit on, or, you know, a jacket or a trench coat over your suit or whatever it is. This type of fragrance just fits perfectly with that, to me. And then, Speaking of fragrances that fit perfect dressed up, you could also dress this down, but I love this fragrance. I wish I had a backup, but I'm happy with the one I have. It's Francesco Smalto Pour Homme. Smalto Pour Homme. Which apparently there were different versions of this. I don't know, you know, there was an argument recently about which one should you get. The one with the gold band, the one without the gold band. I don't think it matters. I say just get whatever you can get because this is discontinued and very hard to come by. But originally, I think that the gold band around this had like, I think it had like grooves in it or something. But I'm not 100% sure what the, I'm not 100% sure what the difference between the one with the grooves or the ones without the grooves. I don't know. I honestly don't know. All I know is if you can find this, buy it. That's what I would say. If you like the stuff I like and you can find Francesco Smalto Pour Homme, buy it. It has this amazing green, spicy anise, tarragon, rosemary, lavender, this perfect fougere structure with this smoky oak moss in the base. Very Italian leather, Italian citruses, you know. I love this. I love this fragrance. I love the way it wears. I'm a huge fan of Smalto Pour Homme. And then, speaking of fragrances I love, this is Caron's Yatagan. So this is a vintage bottle. You can tell by we can tell by a lot of things, but this is one giveaway. The color of the label is another. And apparently this is an old tester that Anuj had lying around. Sometimes you got to sacrifice the cap, you know, when you want a fragrance. And this is a spicy, woody, I often say it smells like leaves macerating on the forest floor that haven't been disturbed for a month. And then you come along and kind of kick the leaves up and all of the, you know, moisture that's kind of built up under the leaves you kind of smell that decay from the forest floor with this castoreum and leathery base and pine. It's such a great fragrance. I love it. One of my favorite from the 70s, 1976. With tarragon in the top, of course. And then we've got four Hugo Boss fragrances. And these are probably the best four, well, definitely the best four from the house. They really went downhill after this because they started to produce Boss Bottled. Boss Bottled was the worst thing that ever happened to the house because all they did was flankers of Boss Bottled forever. And to be fair, I love Anique Minardo. I hate Boss Bottled. But I love the house, especially stuff like this. Boss number one. You know, if you can find the one that doesn't say number one right here, you're getting an older one. But even the one that does say number one is fine. Just don't get the new one with the silver cap is what I hear. I hear it's a terrible reform. But I've never smelled it. But this is this animalic pissy honey with green apple, tarragon, caraway, juniper, geranium, honey, orris root, jasmine, lavender, lily of the valley, rose, sage, amber, oak moss, musk, patchouli, sandalwood, tobacco. Beautiful tobacco in this fragrance. Cedar, cinnamon. God, I love this. This is in my top 10 of all time. Luckily, I have 3 bottles, so I'm set. And then, speaking of sport fragrances with tarragon, I mentioned Polo Sport. And this is Boss Sport. This was my favorite sport fragrance until I discovered Antaeus Sport. And Antaeus Sport just, you know, came in like Pete Rose, you know. I'm the boss, and that's that. I'm going to be the best shortstop in the league, and that's that. And Hugo Boss Sport is what I thought was a perfect sport fragrance, again, until I met Antaeus Sport. But this has this fresh, spicy, like, combo, is the way I would describe it. It also has Piguets, or marigold, if you would prefer, in the top, which gives it a very distinctive, dry, almost like dry straw. Imagine you're, like, crinkling dry straw. And it has some of that, but There's also this Tarragon with the spicy carnation and geranium and amber and moss and musk and patchouli and sandalwood and tonka and cedar. It's just a great fragrance all in all. Even though it is a sport fragrance, and look at this, very 80s. Look at this with the hockey stick, the tennis rackets. How 80s is that? The pinstripes, I love it. And then probably Boss's most underrated fragrance, Boss Spirit. And I absolutely love this stuff. The sprayer on this bottle is shite. But other than that, I mean, I just decanted or whatever. But other than that, this fragrance is, it basically set a trend to me. This fragrance set a trend because there's a couple fragrances that I think kind of take after that. And we'll talk about those here once we get to them in a little bit. But this has this very green, almost like you're smelling cannabis, right? Mugwort, tarragon, galbanum, almost like there's cannabis in the top. And it's extremely green. It's like green on top of green on top of green, like layers of green. But it dries to this hard leather. And the leather kind of, I think, surprises you because you're just, you know, they're throwing the green in your face. And you're not looking over here for the leather. You're staring right at the green, you know, and it's just coming right at you. It's green, 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 with aldehydes. So it's peppermint, mugwort, tarragon, galbanum, more tarragon. This has tarragon in the top and the heart. This is probably the tarragon poster child. Boss Spirit. I love it. It's probably even backup bottle worthy, but I don't need backups at this point. And probably the fragrance in my collection that from Hugo Boss that I like the least is Boss Elements. Now I still like it. It's not that I don't like it, because it's basically the spicy woody scent with tarragon. Hugo Boss liked tarragon. It's tarragon, bergamot, mandarin orange with plum. There's plum in the top and the heart with thyme, juniper, oak moss, sandalwood, and cedar. And it's just this fresh 90s woody thing. It's a spicy woody thing from the 90s. And you can see the bottle, the elements on the bottle. Kind of a cool little advertising campaign that they had going back in the day. But for me, it's just, it's now moving into that 90s style of fragrances where everything was kind of fresher. You're starting to smell that here. You're starting to get the fresher aspects to it. There's not as much heavy notes like some of the 80s fragrances we were talking about. And while it's not bad, it's not my favorite. Let's put it that way. Boss Elements. If you get it for a very good price, grab it because it's discontinued. But I wouldn't go, don't pay crazy money for that. And then there's a Clive Christian fragrance from 2001 when the Clive Christian house was kind of, the fragrances were, this was the first run of fragrances. Patricia Cho created this one. And this is number 1 for men. So this one right here, number 1 for men. And number 1 for men is one of the most floral, powdery. I would much rather wear Amouage Gold Man if I'm going to wear something like this. But this is not bad. It's definitely not the world's most expensive perfume advertisement right here. You know, it's it's very floral, extremely floral and extremely powdery. There is a tarragon with paprika and cardamom in the top with some musk and vanilla, amber, tonka, sandalwood, vetiver, and cedar. But I don't reach for that very often, as you could imagine. All right, we're on the home stretch. 15 more minutes. We should be good to go. My voice will thank you. Okay, so first, speaking of challenging, fragrances like SAR for the greatest fougere of all time, this is Gucci Nobile. Look at that Gucci guy right there. Doesn't he look cool? What's he doing in there? What's on his hands? It's like he's in a suit, isn't he? But Gucci Nobile is this green spicy fougere, basically, with tarragon, lavender, the usual fougere structure, with the missing note that if you go to Parfumo and pull up the note listing, you'll see the whole note tree. The missing note, though, is tobacco. So there's no tobacco listed, but it's there. I get a big tobacco in the dry down. But this is considered by many to be one of the greatest fougères of all time. And I would agree. I mean, it's right up there with Czar and Francesco Smalto Porome and many of the other ones. There's even some more we're about to talk about here. But staying with the House of Gucci first, in 2003, Michel Almerac created this legendary scent. This is Gucci Porome 1. So Gucci Porome 1 came out in 2003. It's lavender with tarragon, ginger, papyrus, geranium, jasmine, patchouli, pimento, pink pepper, sandalwood, cedar, amber, musk, sage, tonka bean, vanilla, vetiver, and frankincense. And the stars of the show here are basically frankincense, papyrus, extremely dry cedar. Imagine you took cedar and very, very dry papyrus, woody, dry cedar, bone dry. And I love that about this. So I'm just glad to have a couple drops. I will wear this and do a full review, hopefully soon. I need to start doing some full reviews. And then we've got a Givenchy, and this is Xerius. Now, this is an older splash. I hear the newer one in the white bottle is not as good, but I've never smelled it myself. But this is also kind of in the same vein, this spicy, woody, fougere-like take. Very, very elegant, very classy. Fougères to me are kind of traditional, masculine, classy. This has lavender and ylang-ylang, tarragon, cypress. There is a cypress note in here, and there's a balsam spruce note in the base with a little bit of leather, a little bit of frankincense, but it's very traditional fougere, very safe. You know, it's there's nothing that really will jump out. This is from 1986, by the way. Not my favorite Givenchy. I'd rather wear a Givenchy Gentleman from the 70s, but that is a good fragrance. Xerius by Givenchy is a good perfume. And going back to the 90s, this is Byblos for Man. Yes, Byblos for Man is what this actually is. And Byblos for Man is kind of the citrusy, spicy, fresh fragrance, but with some... What I like about this, there's a little bit of violet leaf. So it kind of adds this, extra dimension, this element. The violet leaf adds this ozonic twist to it. And there's tarragon, artemisia, lavender, nutmeg, thyme, oak moss, musk, patchouli, vetiver, and cedar. But mostly what you'll get is lots of citruses. So the citruses last for a long time, and spices. And so good perfume. But again, you're getting into the 90s. This is 93, so everything is kind of fresher, and it is discontinued though. So if you're into that type of fragrance, or you're just a collector, sometimes you can find these still for a very good price. These can be found very cheap. And then, speaking of being found for very cheap, this is Rochas Globe. I'd love to know who made this one day, because this is a good fragrance. Tarragon, caraway, bergamot, spicy, woody, with the dry down of this leathery, resinous labdanum, and which I love, with patchouli, sandalwood, vetiver, and cedar. So Rochas Globe. Rochas is a really underrated house. They make great fragrances. And then we've got probably one of the most underrated fragrances in the Halston lineup. This is Halston Catalyst. And, I mean, look at this bottle. Looks like a test tube. I love this stuff. I need to wear this soon. It's so good. Spicy, woody. There is this very interesting vodka note in the top. There's a million notes in here. It's got everything. But lavender, tarragon, galbanum. There's this mintiness to it as well. There's herbal sage. And there is little fruity touches to go along with the floral heart. There's spicy touches like nutmeg. There's green touches. I think there's even like a green grass note in here. And then it dries down to this leathery, resinous, with a slight touch of animalic. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe there's a bit of castoreum in here. But I'm a huge fan of Catalyst, and this is a Halston Fragrances Inc. bottle. But if you can find this in any iteration, I'd say get it. Catalyst is amazing. So you can see my kind of fragrances over and over and over again with Tarragon, and that's kind of the thing. It's a note that was used heavily in some of my, my favorite decade. The 70s and 80s used Tarragon very heavily in masculine fragrances. Now we're going to go to the 90s. This is 1999. This is Casual Friday. And this is a Dominique Ropillon, believe it or not. This is a very good fragrance. Very wearable. There's this sweet, spicy aspect to it as well. I always said this is like what Le Male should have been. This is the best version of Le Male, okay? I enjoy wearing this. I do not enjoy wearing Le Male, but Casual Friday uses this anise tarragon, which is a combo I really like because they play off of each other well. So you have anise with tarragon, coriander, and then there's some fruity aspect. There's fruits with cardamom and cinnamon. The main notes are basically that lavender, cinnamon, and vanilla in the base. And so there are other things, patchouli, tonka, amber, oak moss, and cedar. But that's why I say it kind of gives me this Le Male vibe, because it's lavender with the vanilla. But I think this is the best version because all of the other pieces brought in, whereas Le Male is kind of a little bit more boring and way too sweet. This tones the sweetness down, and it brings in, other facets, the fruits, the oak moss. So yes, Casual Friday, but you're gonna have to pay big money for this. This is very hard to find. And then we've got a Michael Kors. This is Michael for Men. Okay, so Michael for Men is 2001 release. They then did a couple iterations. So the original that I have just says Michael. They then did one that says Michael Kors. All right. Either way, if it says Michael or Michael Kors, get it. If it says Michael or Michael Kors vertical instead of horizontal, it's a completely different fragrance. So be careful. But this is basically this woody, spicy pipe tobacco with dried fruits and suede with elemi and tarragon and star anise and coriander and thyme. Great designer. Probably by far the best Michael Kors fragrance. And this is a Harry Fremont creation. Again, he's a great perfumer. All right, let me pop another lozenge in. I feel like I'm losing the battle with my throat. All right. Round two. Okay, so a couple more minutes and we'll be done. Next on the list we have Loewe Essentia. If you like polo green, check this out. That's all I'll say. This is what the older bottles look like. The newer ones went to the standard Loewe bottles, which basically look like this. This is a great fragrance too, by the way. If you liked Dior Homme, yeah. If you liked Dior Homme, check out 001 Man. But this is spicy green take on something like Polo green. There's tarragon, galbanum, and pine with this leathery dry down. Came out in '88. So a full decade after Polo green. But be careful because they released a eau de parfum. And I don't know what the eau de parfum smells like. That came out in 2018. So the eau de toilette is the one you probably want to hunt down. And then we've got a Xerjoff. My only bottle of Xerjoff. This is Xerjoff Homme. So Xerjoff Homme is this leathery, spicy fragrance. Oh man, I love it. It's a little similar to something like Gomma, which I showed earlier, or Knitze 10. It has that, vibe to it, with tarragon in the top and the smoky birch in the dry down. Beautiful fragrance. And for a guy who hates Xerjoff, for me to have a bottle, it's a good fragrance. All right, a couple amouages. We've got Jubilation Woman. This is the tester bottle, the just generic tester they used to have around the stores back in the day. And Jubilation Ladies is what it said on the bottom. But this is an amazing fragrance. If you like Diaghilev, if you like, Rochas Femme, if you like those kind of fragrances, I would urge you to try Jubilation 25 for women. The tarragon in the top with the rose and ylang ylang, which was like a very classic amouage combo. Rose and ylang ylang were heavily used throughout their older fragrances with Divana, Labdanum, Rose, Frankincense, Ambergris, Musk, Myrrh, Patchouli, and Vetiver. And the missing note is cumin. There's a lot of cumin in the top of this, but I love it. It's an amazing Chypre, Oriental / Chypre fragrance. And then from 2010, this is Karine Vincent Spanner's first fragrance, I think, from 2010. And this is called Memoir Man. This is the only amouage I don't have a cap on because it's a tester, and I hate it. I wish I would have just ponied up and bought the fragrance with the cap, but I'm happy to have this because you can't find these anymore. These testers are getting harder and harder to find because the new guy, Renaud Salmon, or whatever his name is, the fish guy, he is cracking down on, the testers and stuff like that. He's putting clamps on the production. And Memoir Man is stunning. It's amazing. It's green absinthe, basil, tarragon, mint with lavender absolute, and that beautiful frankincense that you know from amouage with leather and tobacco. It's like being in an enchanted forest, honestly. And then we've got Salvador Dali Pour Homme. This is Thierry Vassar's best work, in my opinion. I love this stuff. It's a spicy, animalic, anise with tarragon, again, winning combination in the top. Lavender, heliotrope, moss, geranium, jasmine, lily of the valley, amber, musk, patchouli, vanilla, and vetiver. And, if you're a fan of Kouros, if you're a fan of Antaeus, if you're a fan of, fougères, this is like a spicy animalic fougère. But I think it's one of Thierry Vassar's best works. And it's also one of the best value for money fragrances you can buy. And it's one of the coolest bottles. Speaking of cool bottles, from 1992, this is Salvador by Salvador Dali. And this is a Gerard Anthony and Ilias Armendis concoction. And if you like Boss Spirit, okay, look at the yellow in Boss Spirit. Look at the yellow colors here. If you like Boss Spirit with the blue, check this out. If Boss Spirit's too harsh for you, this is almost like Boss Spirit mixed with Safari, or you know, Guerlain's Heritage, or it has that vibe, or YSL Jazz. It's like jazz mixed with Boss Spirit. It's amazing though. The leather, the tarragon, the cinnamon, it's all great. I mean, Gerard Anthony is one of the greatest fragrances, one of the greatest perfumers of all time, in my opinion. And then, a couple more. Dolce & Gabbana Pour Homme. This is the original Euro Italia version. That's the one that you want. The one that says Euro Italia with the shitty sticker on the front of the bottle. Spicy and woody. I had to tape the sticker because it kept coming off. But it's tarragon, lavender, cardamom, pepper, sage, iris, sandalwood, tobacco, tonka, cedar. And it's so Italian. It's so, it's such a great fragrance. It is fresh, but it also has that tobacco. Probably one of my favorite fresh tobaccos. Great to wear in the heat. Even though it's got that tobacco, it's got the hidden weapon of iris. And the iris just makes everything seem so posh and smooth. I love it. I'm a huge fan. But it's getting harder and harder and harder to find. So if you can find a bottle, grab it. The newer version I hear is not as good, but I've never smelled it. Okay, next we've got Charles Jourdan Un Homme, which again, anise with tarragon in the top, bergamot, marjoram, lavender, lemon, cyclamen, carnation, geranium, jasmine, patchouli, cedar, amber, oak moss, leather, musk, sandalwood, and tonka. And if you like vintage fragrances, you will like Charles Jourdan Un Homme. It came out in 81, and, you know, many people would compare this to something like, I don't know, Patou Pour Homme, or maybe Marbert Man, or something like that. You know, it's it doesn't have the honey of Marbert Man, but it has a lot of everything else. And probably Patou Pour Homme is a good comparison, or Dunhill Blend 30, or something like that. You know, it's taking its clues from those kind of fragrances, and but it's not as hyped as some of those. So if you can find that for cheap, grab it. It's very well worth it. And then we've got another fougere that will compete with some of the best fougères out there. This is Enrico Coveri Pour Homme. I love this scent. Citrusy with pine, clove, cumin, tarragon, geranium, jasmine, patchouli, cedar, vetiver, sandalwood, amber, musk, and vanilla. And if you're a fan of stuff like Xerius by Givenchy, you know, these play in the same sandbox. Xerius and Enrico Coveri Pour Homme. It's got that fougere DNA to it. And this is officially discontinued, but I think you can probably still find bottles floating around for relatively cheap. All right, last couple. We've got Montana Parfum D'Homme. Now, I've got an older bottle of this too. This is a newer bottle. This is officially discontinued though. So these two fragrances share a lot in common, okay? Havana and Montana Parfum D'Homme. And this is like Havana without the tobacco. So this focuses more on the leather. but there's so much more going on. It's spicy, it's aldehydic, there's pine, there's herbal sage, pepper, cinnamon, patchouli, oak moss, labdanum, there's wood, so there's a lot going on. Definitely Montana's best fragrance. Definitely, by far. So, Montana Parfum D'Homme. And then we've got Romeo Gigli per Uomo. Tarragon in the top with plum. And cinnamon is kind of the star of the show here. This honeyed cinnamon, 90s cinnamon. There's something special about 90s cinnamon. Balenciaga Pour Homme from 1990 had one of the best cinnamon notes. This from 1991, one of the best cinnamon notes. There's just something about early 90s cinnamon with plum and this ambery, waxy Styrax dry down. Beautiful, beautiful fragrance. I love it. And it's an Alberto Morillas, before Alberto Morillas became big time mainstream. Okay, next on the list we have, sorry, I've got these in there twice. All right, next on the list we have a Roja, and this is Scandal Pour Homme. So this is Roja's take on a fougere, if you will. This is Roja's take on you know, a spicy fougere. Pick whichever one you want. He Roja'd it up. It's got that posh Roja vibe to it. There's a slight hit of spearmint with old school tarragon in the top. And the base supposedly has real ambergris. And this is one of the older Roja bottles. That's what they used to look like before he bedazzled the cap. And then we've got Danger. So Danger Pour Homme Parfum, which smells a lot like Heritage, has a tarragon note. That's one of the differences from Heritage by Guerlain. So this has tarragon with ambergris and cumin. And so there's no ambergris, there's no cumin, there's no rhubarb in Heritage. So he kind of did stuff like that. There's no violet. You know, he added little bits here and there, but, you know, you can't deny that this is Heritage remade. And finally, the last fragrance, we've got Diaghilev. So Diaghilev is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. It made #1 on my Chypre list. And there's a lot of reasons why. But I've often wondered about that tarragon in the top, because there's something very special in the top of this fragrance when you first spray. Obviously, Roja fragrances are known for their base, being very base heavy, really kind of waiting for the dry down to get a lot of the notes that shine through. But here you get it right from the beginning. I mean, it's spicy, it's kind of challenging right from the get-go, and it's such a great Chypre, but it is very expensive. So Diaghilev is the final one on the list. Okay, so sorry about the throat. At least we made it through. I'm going to go rest the throat. I'm going to go get some hot tea or something and put these fragrances away. So I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for watching the unboxing and the This Is Not a Top 10 Tarragon episode. It officially happened. Let me know what some of your favorites are. And probably be back tomorrow with another video if I'm feeling up to it. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye now.